Hello, everybody. Let's see who's coming in. Thank you. Sorry, we were starting just after 7, so everyone should be shuffling in right now. I will give everyone a few moments just to make sure they all come in, because they're all starting to flow in right now. I don't know how much of that is just counter lag versus actually people coming in. So let's give it a few moments. We'll sit here in awkward silence. No, I won't make awkward silence. I'll make an awkward noise instead as we get going. All right, hello from Chicago, Jim. Welcome, Jim. Where else do we have people coming from? I see some people I went to high school with even, actually. Boston, Toronto.
Hey, Toowoomba, Queensland. Yeah.
Hey, found a native for you. Calgary, Brisbane. Look, you're bringing out all the Aussies. Metuchen. Oh, Rob is here. Hi, Rob. Ken Brooks, good to see you from Connecticut. This might be the most Australian crowd we've ever had.
It's a good time slot.
Tampa, Hanover, Mexico, a lot of Melbourne. I can't pronounce it. Melbourne or Brisbane. I can't pronounce it with your accent.
Melbourne, Brisbane,
yeah. Bridgewater. We have folks all over. I think there's also selection bias here. All the people who are just in New York probably aren't saying hi as much because they're always there. Yeah. All right. So it seems like we had a good inflow. Oh, Lexington from Philly. All right. Great seeing everybody. Okay. So now that it's starting to steady off the amount of people coming in, we will get going a little bit. So welcome everybody to the kickoff for our week. I'm always very excited. This is our 6th year we are doing the conference, and we always like, just to make it that much harder and stressful for all of us, to host a meetup the same week as the conference. Just make it a jam-packed. In the years past, we've done 2 days of conference and a meetup. Now we're doing a meetup, 2 days of workshops, and 2 days of conference. So it's 5 days of R this week. Tomorrow's only respite we have as a way to get settled and get going on it. So we're very, very excited for this. So welcome again to another virtual meetup. I want to thank EcoHealth Alliance for giving us the Zoom link. That's always a big help. That's very, very helpful. And we want to welcome you all, and hopefully we'll see a lot of you the rest of this week. The first thing we always do when we're in person is ask about jobs, who is hiring. So since it's impractical to have everyone sort of shout jobs at us in Zoom, if you can go to the NYHackR Slack at nyhackr.slack.com, go there and go to the job postings channel and put your job there. Over the past decade, we've gotten so many people's jobs simply by saying who's hiring and having companies raise their hands. So we want to continue that even though we are not in person. So please go to the job postings channel and post any jobs you might have. We love getting people jobs. Again, another thing we like doing, which we unfortunately can't do together anymore, is our pizza poll. So this month, I got from a place called Nomad Pizza. As you can see, it's Neapolitan style with some good char crust. It has a good the cheese lock fell apart. The cheese lock did not hold in place. That's good to know. There's not a lot of cheese lock. It's a decent place. Especially it's the first time eating it. I like the place. So I shouldn't say it's a decent place. It's decent because I just saw it. I will taste this in a little bit and see how good it is. I hope everyone here is having pizza along with me or other favorite food. Hope you're enjoying that. Miles, if you're not aware, we do a opinion poll on pizza every single month. So we had to have pizza delivered. Very important part of what we do here. This week, as I mentioned, NYR, we still have a few days if you want to buy tickets. We have workshops Wednesday and Thursday, different workshops. We have GIS and mapping. We have using Git. We have even a scikit-learn workshop. We have a Shiny and DataViz workshop. We have a Tidyverse workshop and a web scraping workshop. And of course, there was a machine learning workshop in R, but that's sold out. So we still have those. And the conference itself is Friday through Saturday. If you want tickets, use code NYHackR for a 20% discount, because this conference is really meant to be this meetup extended over 2 full days and just a big party for R. When we do it in person, we have live music, not live music, we have recorded music, we have ice cream, we have pizza, it's a real party. So we're gonna try to recreate as much of that as we can virtually and try to make it as much fun as possible. Next month, we are gonna have a meetup about using the command line in the terminal. Don't have the exact date yet, but it's going to be a really fun talk all about using tmux and Vim and setting up your terminal environment and making it just much more usable. Because I know a lot of R users feel comfortable with the R console, but they don't necessarily feel comfortable at a terminal, at like a Linux terminal. So this is a talk that hopefully help a lot of you get more and more comfortable. Because I know myself, still to this day, but especially when I started, I could use R, but as soon as I got to the terminal, I was like, ooh, am I going to mess up my computer? So I'm really excited to have this talk. We also have a talk scheduled in October, not the exact date yet, but coming all the way from, our speaker is going to be coming from Scotland. I don't think we can have anyone coming from farther away than Australia. I think that's the farthest physical point on Earth. Maybe, don't exactly quote me on that, because I know technically the farthest point on Earth right now is actually in the middle of the ocean, but probably the farthest away as planes go is probably Australia. So with that, I do want to say thank you to our speaker coming up. And the way this occurred was he was posting about stuff about Drake on Twitter. I'm like, this is awesome. I want to learn more about Drake. And I pestered him with so many questions over the span of a few days, and he patiently answered all my questions very nicely. And then I said, okay, no good deed goes unpunished. How would you like to talk at the meetup? And he graciously agreed to work in the time zones. It is 9 a.m. for him. So we are very excited that he made it all the way here. Just one more logistical thing before we get started. I see a bunch of people are asking questions in the Zoom webinar and probably in the Slack channel. Ahmad, I believe we created a Slack channel for this meetup. The name of it is, would you mind running that by me?
So the name of it is today's date. So one moment. It should be August. I'm actually renaming it now. August 10 meetup.
August 10 meetup. So folks, if you have questions, the way this is going to work is it's hard to everyone ask questions of Miles because we're all digital. If you could post your questions in the Slack channel, August 10th meetup, or here in the Zoom webinar chat, I'll do my best to collate all of them and ask all the questions at the end. This has worked out for us so far, so please go ahead and ask every question you've got in the Slack channel or here in the Zoom webinar. So just to recap, thank you for coming to our week. Hope you're enjoying pizza at home. I saw someone already posted a job postings. Keep that up. September meetup is about the terminal. The October meetup is going to be really awesome too. You'll learn more about that next month. And everyone welcome from the other side of the world, I guess other side, halfway around the world, Miles McBain. Thank you very much for being here with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Yeah, look, it is a real honor, and I'm like stoked to be warming up the crowd for the R conference. You know, look, you're still on my bucket list, New York. I do want to get to the R conference myself and this meetup, but you know, virtually is what we've got to do for now. And yeah, that should work pretty well, I think, for this presentation I put together.
Great.
So what are we talking about? I'll just get my screen share going. All right, can you see a presentation? I'm assuming that's good. Can someone say yes?
Yes.
Yes, all right, good. Okay, so yeah, what I want to do with this talk is kind of explore some different project workflow styles. And my objective is simply to give you a fresh way to understand the strengths and weaknesses of different project workflow styles, and hopefully some new ideas you can take on and use in your own workflows. So the outline, so I want to talk about workflows as tools for enjoyment. And then I want to explore some of the main workflow styles that people use. And then, yeah, I want to talk about the workflow style that my team use, which is Drake and DFlow, just briefly, because I want to do more of a demo on that. So let's go. Oh, that's gone to the very last slide for some reason. Hang on, sorry. All right. First thing is an exercise. I want you to recall a time when you had the most fun whilst working. And I don't mean like you were on Slack and you were laughing at GIFs you guys were sending each other or you people were sending each other. I mean, simultaneous to the act of working, you were feeling kind of playful, joyful, delighted feelings. I want you to really recall this memory. So where you were, who was there, what you were doing, how you were doing it. Okay, so I think you should keep hold of this memory and, you know, maybe swap it with someone else in the meetup later on, because your answers, I think, might surprise each other. Certainly, oh man. Okay, so don't press that button, sorry. Certainly, you know, this is an interesting question to reflect on. Was your example sitting at a computer doing data science? So mine wasn't. So this is a seafood processing facility in Reykjavik, Iceland. I haven't worked in Reykjavik, Iceland, but I worked in a very similar facility, or basically a carbon copy of this in Cairns in North Queensland. And some context is that in Australia, we associate seafood with Christmas time. So there's this big peak demand. And if you're looking for, you know, seasonal work, it's really easy work to get. And so I did this for a few seasons over a few years. So let me talk you through what's happening here. You know, there's a sort of production line, and this person here is making a cut to take a fillet off a big fish. This person here is making a different cut to like take the skin off that fillet. And I'm pretty sure this person is either like checking for bones or doing some sort of portioning cut. So why do I think this is fun? Well, you're learning a new skill, like learning a knife. Learning to use a knife effectively is a really like nice life skill to have. Then I think, you know, once you can do that effectively, there's a bit of banter, a bit of chat that happens. I know these people are wearing earmuffs, but we didn't have that. So there's, you know, there's a bit of camaraderie, and you're all pulling towards a common goal, which is basically like to empty this massive bin of fish that is like sitting over here, and then you can all go home. So that's pretty, you know, it's a pretty obvious common goal you can all look at together. And yeah, I think there's a bit of a flow to it. And that's sort of the really important thing is like for this production line to work effectively, this has to go like, you know, cut for cut for cut. You know, if this person's too fast, they'll pile up here. And if this person's too slow, this person will be waiting. So we've kind of got to get a sense of like what your immediate team members' capabilities are and how tired they are and what mood they're in. And you've really got to be pulling together. So if I try and abstract that into a few points, I think, you know, there's working with others toward a common goal, there's working with a rhythm or a flow, and there's technical experimentation with rapid feedback. So that's, you know, every cut I make, I get to see how did I go? What was the yield? Should I change my grip? Should I sharpen the knife? Should I change the pitch of the knife? Should I change the speed at which I cut? And all that, you know, allows you to kind of hone in on like a really like smooth, you know, kind of technique. So these ideas are kind of compatible with some literature on workflow. So this is a book called Flow by a guy called Mihai. It's from the 90s, maybe some of you have read it. And basically his idea is like, he talks about the difference between pleasure and enjoyment. And pleasure is this kind of passive thing, and enjoyment is active. And his idea is that we can derive enjoyment from our work when we're able to enter this mental state called flow. And some of us might know this as like being in the zone. And so when you're in the zone, or when you're in this flow state, time is distorted. We kind of lose focus on our bodies and our aches and our pains, and we lose focus on our worries and our stresses, and we're sort of fully absorbed in achieving our goal. Now, Mihai says that two things that I mentioned, so having a goal and having feedback are pretty much critical to getting into this flow state. But his sort of main point is that there has to be this really good match between the skills that you have and the challenges that you're facing. So you have to feel challenged, but you also have to have the confidence that you can overcome this challenge. And, you know, otherwise, if things are too easy, then you're going to get bored. And that can lead to sort of non-productive behavior. And if things are too hard, you're going to get anxious, and that can lead to other non-productive behaviors. So I think, you know, there's a really natural mapping, at least for me, between this and data science. Like data science is a, you know, a sense-making profession. Things that make me anxious are when things don't make sense. The question doesn't make sense. The data doesn't make sense. And things that make me bored are when there's no questions to answer. Like, this is boring. I'm just doing like administrative stuff. Like, where's the good stuff? And if I think about my daily kind of work in R, I can quite easily drop a few things in these categories, right? So this is all really boring things that I just wish I didn't have to do. And these are like things that make me sort of like, you know, they're like the record scratch, like, oh no, now I've got to deal with this. Like, why is this happening? I'm a bit anxious and stressed out, right? And so I think, you know, I want to frame the role of workflow to kind of keep us in this zone. And the way that I think workflows do that is they paper over a lot of this stuff. They just completely take it away. And, you know, you can't take this stuff away, but you can give people easy kind of access panels, to quote Jenny Bryant, to address some of this stuff. And so, yeah, I think there are different types of workflows in use for our projects, and they each have kind of different ways that they balance these two halves here. So I want to talk about our project workflow styles. And yeah, I'm just zooming in on the R aspect of our work. I know like data science work and statistical work is much more than like sitting down at the computer doing R. You know, a lot of it is talking to people and presenting to people and all this kind of stuff. So you can't do that in R, or at least maybe you shouldn't. And I want to also call out a collaborator. So Dean Macchiori, I saw him jump into the chat earlier. So he's got this repo that collects all different kinds of workflow tools and papers and blog posts and stuff. And he and I have been like trying to work on a bit of a write-up that looks at different R workflow styles and their strengths and weaknesses with respect to different tasks. And a lot of those ideas are kind of embedded in this talk in the next section. So the key point for this is I just want to say, like, one workflow does not rule them all. So I'm not here to tell you like, I've come up with the greatest thing and you should all use it, because it really depends on what you're doing, what you're making, and what your priorities are. You know, are you building an analysis? Are you answering questions with data? Are you making production models that, you know, score rows in a database and give them zeros and ones, depending on whether you think they'll buy something or click something? Or are you building an application that wraps right around that in Shiny and allows people to like tweak parameters and you view forecasts and stuff? You know, so there's a huge universe of stuff we could be building. And then it's also, you know, like, what are our priorities? Like, we always talk about reproducibility, but are we talking about reproducibility 5 meters away in 5 minutes time? Or are we talking about, you know, a year from now, 100 years from now? Very different sorts of approaches. Automation, similarly, like, are we talking about like semi-automation? I click a button and magic happens. You know, a test run or markdown reports are built. Or are we talking about like something that runs fully hands-free in the cloud, automatically ingesting data, producing reports every month? That's very different. And this is like kind of my favorite. So peer review is pretty important for our work because there's a lot of stuff that we do that is, you know, you can't write a unit test for methodology. So the only way I can test my methodology is to pitch it at a peer and say, you know, hey, does this make sense? And they might go, oh, yeah, no, that makes sense. Or, oh, no, sorry, I really don't think that will be appropriate. And if we build our projects to be peer reviewed, as I think we probably should, then we're going to prioritize, you know, communication, making things clear, and really surfacing like the key kind of decision points in the project. So the workflow styles I want to run through. So there's notebook. I didn't really have a good name for this one, so it's called domain-specific folder structure. Project is an R package, which is a, you know, hot topic at the moment, and target graphs. So let's talk about notebooks. Now, like, we're probably all well and truly used to this as a concept now, but I think we really should acknowledge that combining the presentation layer and the computational layer in one document really does save a huge amount of like boring work, importing and exporting results between two different tools. And, you know, they do offer some help with reproducing work because, you know, if I render this, then the code that ran is the code that produced the output. And that's like some guarantee that this thing is going to be reproducible. So this is, you know, looking at how do notebooks keep us in the flow channel here? Like, how do they help make our work enjoyable? So yeah, like you know, they save us from boring importing and exporting. Context switching, I think, is actually a huge thing. Like having it all in one application and being able to see the thing evolve as they go. That's really important. They save us from reproducibility stuff, or they help. They save us from deciding what to name all the little like plots and tables and stuff like to export, which is really important. And we don't have to learn a markup language like HTML or JavaScript or LaTeX. So where are they falling down? Like, where are they creating niggles for us? Yeah, like I think a lot of these are related. So I'll talk about the one that's the odd one out first. So abstraction leakages are where we have an error that pops up from down in the stack. So the classic example is I'm trying to insert a GIF into my you know, our markdown report, and I stuff up the URL and I get a really alien error message from Pandoc. That's quite, you know, confronting to me. So, you know, that happens and that's a bit stressful. All these other things are kind of related to the fact that caching in notebooks is like a pretty underdeveloped feature. Like, I know it's possible in our markdown, but if you look at the our markdown manual, it basically says like, oh, you want to do caching? Like, yeah, you should really go read about cache invalidation. And the options are kind of like expert options. And they say things like, be careful when you use this. So it certainly doesn't make any guarantees. And I think because it's hard, a lot of people don't use it. And because people don't use it, then they end up in this situation where they're waiting for their notebooks to run or to render all the time. And because that's a problem, they end up over here where they only want to run small chunks of work at a time. And you end up with this situation where you like run chunks out of order, or you run them like too many times. They weren't meant to be run twice in a row. And you get these weird phantom bugs appearing that each a time. This talk, which is a pretty good talk, talks a lot about this problem. So the other thing I want to say is like, I don't think these scale very well with respect to the amount of code. If you have a lot of code and you try and jam that into a notebook, what happens is this narrative tension develops between the code and the text. like, you know, if you've got like tiered SQL joins in your notebook, and then you don't want to talk about those. You just want to say like, I got the data and then I, you know, formatted it this way, and now I'm doing my modeling. You don't want to have to explain like, oh yeah, I joined this table and I coalesced this, and I, you know, like, so basically now we don't have literate programming. We've got two documents kind of jammed together, but making each other harder to understand. So when to use notebooks, like I think they work well in the classroom because they help students and teachers focus on data science, like their domain specific tool. They work beautifully for exploratory data analysis because they help you kind of like do this stream of consciousness thing. You can sort of stay in the zone, focusing on the next plot, the next thing, getting that rapid feedback, seeing the document evolve, really good. For reports and papers where there's much more text than code. And actually they work quite nicely for like simple dashboards. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is domain specific folder structures. And here are two. So maybe like it's a bad name, but maybe you can get the flavor of what I'm talking about here. Like basically they provide a neat structure, like a bunch of little boxes. And they say, if you put your stuff in these boxes and you run these, you know, commands, I will do X thing for you. So in the case of Workflower, Workflower's thing is basically it wants to collect a bunch of notebooks for you and publish them into a research website. So you put all your notebooks in here and it will run them for you, and it totally handles all the back-end stuff. So it makes commits to Git, it renders it into the docs folder and sets that up on GitHub pages, and it sets you up with a nice website. rOpensci is a different beast. It has this kind of gather, cook, analyze, present workflow. And the idea of this is that I can put in markdown documents into any of these buckets, and then everything that happens in this bucket is the output for the next bucket. And this analyze bucket only depends on the outputs of the cook bucket. So what that means is if I make a change here in cook, then I can say like, you know, rOpensci rerun this pipeline. I don't remember what the command is, but it'll look at this and go, oh yeah, okay, you changed something in cook. I don't need to rerun the gather step. I'll just rerun cook, analyze, present. And what this is doing, this is papering over this makefile stuff here. And I'll talk a little bit more about makefiles later. But that's kind of the flavor of these tools, is that they save you a lot of bookkeeping. So in one case it was Git, in the other case it was a makefile, but it's sort of mainly about this boring bookkeeping stuff, which is great. And yeah, as we saw, they can help you a little bit with caching. So saving work and not rerunning it every time. I think the biggest thing though is like, these things just give you, like, they save you having to make a hard decision about structure. Decisions about structure are like, I reckon they're even harder than naming things, right? Because as the project grows in scope, you know, the structure that was appropriate for a small project is probably not going to be appropriate for a big project. And so you need some iterations to kind of get to a good structure here, and that's painful. So where are we sort of, falling down? Well, yeah, anytime you have a domain mismatch, you're going to be in this sort of anxious area. That's where you want to do something that doesn't quite fit neatly into the boxes. And yeah, I mean, one example would be like, oh, I want to do imputation. Oh, I want to do model-based imputation. Oh, is that a modeling step or a data munging step? You know, there's all these kind of ambiguities that can sort of make these things feel awkward. So when should you use these? I think really when there's a close match with your domain and your goal. So if you want to make a research website, use Workflower. If you want to have a simple workflow with simple caching that's like pretty easy to understand, use rOpensci tools. But if you need more granularity, you're going to need to use something more complicated. These are some examples for you to look at later. Okay, so project is an R package. Yeah, I've written a little bit about this one recently, so there's a blog post there you can go and have a look at. And I kind of want to defer a lot to that blog post. But yeah, look, the short story is I'm not a big fan of this. And look, like, you know, it barely fits on a slide, and this is a trivial example. The signal to noise ratio is quite poor, I think. And my main gripe is like, it's just the payoff is questionable. You can spend a lot of time on this beautifully paved highway, getting to an R package, complying with CMD check, validating your code with tests, matching your description, your namespace, shoehorning your results into vignettes. But actually you can be nowhere with respect to achieving your project's goals. And I think if you're going to write packages for your projects, you know, do better things like encapsulate encapsulate algorithms and business logic into packages so you can share them between your projects. And maybe if you want that smooth DevTools use this experience, write packages that do that, but for your domain. So you have a much more natural mapping between this and what you're trying to do. And I got some interesting feedback on this blog post. It turned out that like what I thought was that people were really getting into the automated validation side. So, you know, they were like loving check, test, They were loving being able to install and have the dependencies come along, which, by the way, and this is not a robust way to manage dependencies. And I talk a bit about that in the blog post. And I thought people were getting into like having that all linked up to GitHub and having things fire off on every commit. So it turns out that some people like that, but a lot of people like this. And that was like, wow, this was really interesting to me. I think I could give like a whole 20-minute rant just on this subject. So this is the shortcut for DevTools load all in RStudio. And people are using our package structure to get access to this type of stuff. And I think it's an interesting thing because shortcuts for automations that you make are really hard to set up in RStudio. They're a little bit easier recently with the package made by Garrick Aiden Bowie called Shortcuts, but there's nothing in RStudio itself. Like you basically got to write a package to do this. So people are kind of reappropriating existing automations to make their life easier, but to do that, they have to use an R package, but they're just creating R packages that they never planned to install. So it's really interesting what's happening there. Yeah, so I'll leave it there. So what's project as an R package giving us, I think? A lot of admin stuff. Yeah, so boring, like cleaning my R environment, DevTools load all nice stuff like that. Use this, beautifully handles all the sort of file system admin. Again, saving us a decision about structure. Like here is a tried and tested structure and you're pretty much guaranteed to have an okay time with it. Yeah, and by the way, there is a bugs workflow. It's not a debugging workflow, but the idea that you write tests, you run them often, and if you get a problem, you rerun. Sorry, you write a new test that stops you from having regressions. I mean, that's nice. Now, what's the problem? I'm not going to go into all these, but it's just all this niggling stuff that is not related to a project, but it's related to a package. And you've got to like just deal with all these things all the time. But I think the biggest thing is that if you have someone like available to you who could review your work, who's a domain expert and they know R, but they don't know R packages, like there's a fair bit of work for them to do, like a fair bit of stuff for them to get their head around to review your work. Like they've got to become a package developer, basically. And that just feels wrong. Like it's the wrong way to like make the people fit the software. You need to make the software fit the people. So that's my main kind of thing. All right. So use projects as R packages. Yeah, when you have something that you want to archive for a long time, I think this is the main argument, right? Like if you have a reproducible research object and you want that to live into the future for a while, then it makes sense to use like a well understood format for that. If you want to use the DevTools key bindings, like fine, but let's all be honest about that's what we're doing, and maybe if you acknowledge that, you can think about improving from there. So now I want to talk about target graphs. So in a target graph style workflow, you break up your pipeline into little chunks of work and you define this dependency graph that relates the chunks of work. And we call these chunks of work targets. And each one of these targets can be like a data set or a plot or any kind of R object or a file. And the idea is that when I make a change to one of these targets, my target tool analyzes the graph and goes, okay, you changed the histogram plotting code. I know that I only need to re-render the report and output the file. All this stuff beforehand, I don't have to reload the data set or munge it. So yeah, you can see that it's going to save you some computational time. And if you have like a complicated target graph, then that sort of goes to another order of magnitude because everything in these columns represent targets that are not dependent on each other. So these can be run in parallel. And there's some facilities in Drake and other target tools to do that. So that's quite nice. But I actually don't think this is the main selling point of target graph. I think, one of the big things is everything here is cached and you can pull, sorry, I say cache. I know a lot of people say cache. It's just a bad habit that I've got into. So I'm going to say cache, sorry. So these things here are cached and at any point you can read them into your R environment and play with them interactively. And that's super nice for development because, I can read in this, this histogram data and I can, work with it in the context of the plotting code. So let's say like I get an error in the plot, I can quickly jump into the plotting code, load the inputs from the cache and I'm away, I'm debugging. Same thing happens if like something important lands on my desk and I have to immediately jump to a different project. I can jump back to this project and load everything from the cache and I'm sort of back, with everything ready to work on interactive development. The last thing I think is that, these things have a similar property to a notebook, whereas if I build this entire graph, I have some reproducibility guarantees, like the code and the output are kind of synchronized. So that's helpful. So here's some ways we can define target graphs. This is a make file. This is from Jenny Bryan's Stat 545 course. And this is a Drake plan, so Drake by Will Landau, that represents the same project, but these two things aren't equivalent. Because make files are about expressing dependencies between files, and Drake plans are about expressing dependencies between R objects and functions. So, this one has some intermediate kind of outputs that don't need to exist over here. And I don't need to worry about handling them. And that's quite nice. I just want to point out some Drake magic. So Drake actually reads your code to discover dependencies, which is quite cool. So, if you're just looking at this plan here that describes the graph, there's nothing inside this report target that references histogram data or histogram plot. But inside the R Markdown itself, I'm using those things. And Drake has because I flagged it when they're in, Drake has dived in there and found those dependencies and registered them in the graph, which is really cool. And it'll do that with functions as well. So what are we getting from target graphs? I mean, some pretty cool stuff. Like we can quickly navigate to specific work. We're saved from waiting for code to run all the time because we have the caching. That is easy. It's literally you build the graph, caching is handled in the background. No, there's guarantees made, there's no thinking to do. We can easily set up a REPL for debugging quickly. So that's over here as well. Or if we want to just resume work, and they save us from some reproducibility failures. This is a fair bit of stuff, I think. There's a couple of critical things. Target graphs is falling down in a couple of ways. We have to express the target graph now. And I have to learn how to do that. And despite looking like R code, Drake is a sort of DSL in itself, a domain-specific language. So it is R, but it has some special Drake things, and I have to learn about those. And same with make files, they're a different language that I have to learn. But this is the big one, I think. Because target graphs try to be really flexible, they don't tell you what to do. They don't say, look, just put your things in these boxes and everything will be okay. And I think that this is one of the reasons that target graphs are not as popular as they kind of should be or would otherwise be, is because it leaves the user to make this decision. And to make this decision, you have to go and you have to read the Drake manual and you have to kind of engage in this introspective thought process. And this is without the backing of a brand like RStudio saying, no, trust us. This is the way to do things that will be, enjoyable. So it's a bit of a risk investing in this. And that's kind of my motivation for doing a little bit of a demo later on. I want to show you it's not as, it can be complicated, definitely, but you can keep it simple and still go a long way. So when to use target graphs? When you're building your pipelines with many inputs, many outputs, and many intermediate steps. And that's like most data science projects, right? So yeah, these are some examples for you to check out. Now I just want to quickly call out this one. So this is targets, and it's an R package, and it's basically Drake 2.0. So it's the same author. Will Landau has written both of these. Targets is quite new. It's still, I would say it's not stable yet. The other thing is, it's not like targets is better in every way than Drake. It makes a different set of trade-offs, and it's just, for most things it's better, for some things it's not. And so it really depends again on what your priorities are. So I'm going to show you a workflow in Drake, and don't feel like that is completely superseded and outdated by targets. I think Drake is still a very valid choice, especially now while targets is evolving. I think targets will kind of take a while to mature, because Will has kind of made targets to be an engine, but there's still a UI layer that can be built on top of that engine, and that will take a little while to come. Okay, so Drake and DFlow, what am I talking about? So why did my team choose Drake? Well, yeah, I mean, I guess a lot of people, we run these massive database queries and millions of records, and yeah, we share that platform with other people who do reporting type work. So in order to be courteous people, we don't want to run those queries all the time. We want to rerun them as little as possible, so we want them cached. Then we had this works on my machine syndrome coming in, and I really wanted to kind of stamp this out. So I wanted to set up some sort of easy situation for my team where we could, just run this command, and the results you get are pretty much guaranteed to reproduce in 5 minutes time, 5 meters away. Because people were running stuff and sending plots and attaching code, and people were rerunning it, and it was either not producing the same plot or not working at all. Yeah, so that was getting pretty annoying. And I personally have been burned by the sort of scalability issues with R Markdown. So I call it the RMD monolith approach, just jamming everything into the R Markdown file. I personally had experienced the pain of that and not really scaling. And so, yeah, I was pretty ready to try something else. So what's DFlow? So DFlow is my attempt to make Drake more enjoyable for my team. And so that means like really looking at where Drake was like still annoying and trying to paper over that or make that nicer. So yeah, I help with expressing the target graph. There are a few niggly things in Drake and I kind of make them a little bit easier. I save you a decision about structure, which is the huge one. Like I say, here is the template, just use this and everything's going to be fine, trust me. And yeah, by the by, there's some built-in protection for like common bugs that you might hit. What are the negatives? Well, actually, you know, I'm kind of like too close to this to really think about the negatives. So I'm sure there are plenty, but I don't have a slide for that. But maybe, you know, you tell me what you think the negatives are. But I've written so that was like the 3 or 4 slide intro. I've written 4,000 or so words about this in this blog post, and that was kind of where the discussion between Jared and I started. So you might want to go check that out. And all I really want to say is like, this is a workflow by us for us. So take the ideas that, you know, make for your own enjoyment and just leave the rest. I think that's a pretty good principle for workflows in general. Okay, so demo time. So what I want to do is I want to reproduce that example from Stat 545. So it's a pretty boring example, but at the same time, I don't want to show you like me coding. I want to show you my workflow. So I think I've made the right choice here. We'll see. And it's just a pretty small pipeline that reads a file containing words, and then it makes a frequency plot of the lengths of those words. So how many words for length 5, how many words for length 6, blah, 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 blah. And it makes that plot and it puts that plot into an R Markdown document. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Okay, so now I just need to check. I might need to switch up my screen share to a different desktop. So hold on a second while I just do that. All right, so you should see RStudio now. Is that the case? Can someone just say yes if you see RStudio?
Yes.
All right, thanks, Jared. Okay, so we're gonna do some stuff. All right, so I'm gonna do it from scratch so you can sort of see my whole workflow. Now, I will just say I'm not a regular RStudio user. I've been using it again for like the last couple of weeks, but I haven't used it for years. So if I do some stuff that's like a bit weird and kind of outdated, then you know why. So I'm here. No, what I want to do is create a new project first, because that's the RStudio way of doing things. So I have an existing directory. Okay. Hey, Jared, just so you know, you're not muted. And so I had some stuff going on. Now, here we go. I've got this empty project, right? And okay, so like I said, I've saved you a decision to make. See, my fingers are quite cold. It's winter here, so just give me a second to warm up. I've saved you a decision about what to do with respect to structure. So we can just have a quick look at that. Yeah, this is a handy little function. So this is it. Like pretty basic, right? This is where all our R files go. This is a file that connects to Drake and tells it how to run this work. This particular R file is the plan. This particular R file is our R packages. So let's, what's our library calls? Okay, so let's just go over here, jump to say the plan. So nothing in it, right? But this is all kind of wired up. So I can run this. There's an add-in in Drake called I know you can't read that. I'll just want to tell you the name of the add-in. It's called run a Drake workflow. And so that is this command. It runs rmake. And what rmake does is it runs your work in a fresh R session. So it kind of replaces DevTools load all if you're into the package workflow. It says, you know, all right, fire up the new R session and do all this stuff and then run the plan. So I can run rmake right now. I've got that bound to a keyboard shortcut, so Control M, and Drake will spin around. I'll say all targets up to date, because all my targets are up to date. Cool. So let's have a look at how that's wired up in the _Drake file. So yeah, the responsibility of _Drake is to just set up the environment for the running of the graph. So I'm going to load all your packages, load all your library calls, run that. Then I'm going to source all the files in the R folder. So there's your DevTools load all. And I'm going to return the plan in a config, and then I'm going to build that config. So that's all we do. And if you just want to see, I'll just call it the packages.r. So yeah, just a couple of things. we're running conflicted as standard to avoid namespace issues, clashes. I won't talk about that one, that's in the blog post. And we've got Drake. So it's all pretty basic so far. So what are we trying to do? So what I like to do is to sketch out a high level plan first. So what do we need? Well, we need to have some words, and we'll assume that we have some function to get the words. And what do I want to do with those words? Well, I want to turn it into a data set that I can plot. So I'll have word lengths, and I'll just call that like make word lengths. And that will be on words. And then what I want to do, I want to make a plot. I said I want to make a histogram. So I'll have word lengths histogram, make word, I should just keep it standard so I don't trip myself up. Nice and long. And we'll do that on word lengths. Okay, I'll just drop that down a bit so we can see what we're doing. And then I said we wanted to make a report. Now this is a thing that is a little bit fiddly in Drake, so DFlow has a helper for that. So I do my use RMD, I do histogram. Oh, let's just keep the same thing. Word lengths histogram. Okay, so DFlow says I'm doing some stuff. I've added a doc folder. I've added an RMD. I've added R markdown to your dependencies, and just copy this stuff into your plan. And then I guess we'll choose a better name than that. Word lengths report. Okay, so that's it. That's my plan. Now I haven't written any code to do this. I've just said what I'm going to do. And this is a thing that I do. I don't like, I mean, you saw a complicated graph earlier. I'm not going to fully spec that before I write any code. But what I tend to do is like, if I know that I have an output, I tend to write like a little chain of stuff to get to that output. I find that process really, really helpful. And of course, like sometimes I make the wrong design and I refactor as I go. I think, oh no, like that should be two separate things and blah, blah. Like, that definitely happens. I don't get it right every time. But this is a nice, simple example. So this is probably the right thing to do. One thing I want to say, it's quite a good pattern to keep the data munging step separate from the data loading step, because you know, this is the thing that I'm going to fetch from the internet. And if it was a big thing, like I only want to do that once. But if I have that in the middle of my munging code or mixed in, then every time I make a mistake, which I will in my munging code, then I'm going to refetch the data. So this is a pretty good pattern to use. Okay, so let's do an implementation. So I'm just going to jump over to my presentation and grab the link, but I don't think you'll see that. That's all right. That's just what I'm doing. Okay. So where are we going to go? We want to go into here. Now I'm going to use a shortcut to do that. So you know that shortcut in RStudio, jump to definition. So I'm going to use that. Oh, I thought I was. Oh, no, I haven't yet. I haven't done the magic thing yet. Sorry. So I don't have these functions, right? They don't exist. So I wrote this tool called fnmate. It's an add-in and it also works with Emacs to create prototype function definitions from function calls. So I'm pretty happy with myself. So I have it bound to a keyboard shortcut at the moment, Control-Shift-F. So if I hit Control-Shift-F on that, oh, yeah, it says fnmate wrote, you look at the console, it says fnmate wrote get words to R. And if I hit on that, it'll write that one. And now I've written that one. And now I have all the pieces. And in fact, let's just jump into one of these. You'll see that it's just a stub, but it returns null. But all my functions return null, so they all have return values. So that means that I can actually run this pipeline now. And there we go, everything ran, it needed an R markdown file, everything's working. And if I look, I have another shortcut here. There's a command in Drake called load target at cursor. I think I PR'd that one. Yeah, so, and it may not work now. Oh, that worked. Okay, so I load that target from the cache, and I actually have another shortcut here that outputs the thing that the cursor's onto the console. So run that, and you see that it's null. Cool. So everything's going to be null, but it's all sort of wired up. So the game now is just let's get rid of the nulls. So now I can jump in here, and that thing that I pasted earlier will come in handy. So what I want to do, I probably want to do like a read lines of that URL. Yep. So there's that URL. And I can just save that, hit Control M to run the pipeline, and I got an error. Okay, what's my error? Drake's telling me, could not find function read lines. Yeah, because I didn't actually declare it in my packages file. So let's jump over to packages, and that's a tidyverse thing in reader. So add library tidyverse, save that, close that, run the pipeline. Thinking. All right, we're all good. So let's just reload that target. So Control L for me. Okay, loaded that. I'm going to output it. Okay, it looks like a vector of words. Nice. All right, let's go. Next one. So jump in. What do we want to do with this? Okay, I got my words. And I want to pipe that to... no. So yeah. So what I want is to create a thing, word lengths. And what I want that to be, what that to be is the lengths of the words. So run that. Yep, that looks like that worked. There you go, looks like a vector of lengths. And then I want to make a table. And I want to pipe that to this. This is just a shortcut to get a data frame to plot. All right, now run that. Oh, what happened? Couldn't find pipe. And that was because even though I defined all my dependencies, I haven't actually loaded them into my interactive environment yet. So because that's a thing that happens to me all the time, I have a shortcut for that. So that's Control P here. So load the packages.r. Okay. Run that. Okay, there we go. There's my data frame. So let's just run the pipeline again. Make sure everything's all good. Run the pipeline. Yep. Okay, let's jump back to the plan. Now we're going in for the histogram. All right, so I probably should load word lengths from the cache. So Control Shift L, no, Control L. Could not. See, yeah, I've actually probably committed a feature to Drake that has a bug in it. So sorry, Will. So if I jump, so save that. Let's just go back to the plan. See, it seems to sometimes not work, which is a bit lame. There you go. All right, so I'll have a look at that one later. All right, so I want to pipe this to ggplot. Now what I want the X. I want to make a tall histogram. So I want the, let's just have a look at what this was. Okay, I want the word lengths on the X and the frequency on the Y. Okay, and I'm not doing anything special. Just gonna make a geom call. All right, so run that. Yeah, so it's popped up this tiny histogram here. Another little thing that I like to do is I like to run all my plots and have them appear in a full screen thing. So I'm just going to shift this over to the desktop, blow it up, jump back. Because I hate having to like adjust these panes all the time. So now, oh gosh, you see what I'm saying? Oh man, grab it. Yeah. So if I run that now, I don't get anything taken over my screen, but I can jump over here. Oh, very good error. What's happened? Oh, okay. It decided to, that's weird. Yeah. Okay, let's close that on. Classic. So usually what this does is it will make it over here. Yeah, cool. So that's the way I like to work. I like to have everything full screen and just like, you know, not have to be adjusting stuff all the time. Okay, so, but this is done. And
We can't see your X11 because you're not sharing that screen.
It's on another screen. Yes. Okay. Sorry. Good. All right. So what I'll do is I'll kill that because that's going to be annoying. And for now, we'll just make do with the tiny one here. Cool. Sorry. Yeah, that's an oversight on my part. Now I'll rerun the pipeline. Cool. That seems like that worked. So we'll jump back. And now the final thing, so actually we've got the histogram and we just need to make the report. Okay, so like I said earlier, Drake can look into the report and see targets being used and then register the dependency. So jump into the markdown file. Okay. So the way that we do that is, oh, there's a couple of functions in Drake. One's called load, so it was word lengths is the data set, and I probably want word lengths histogram. So let's just check that that works. That works. Yep. Okay. So that loads those things into my Markdown environment, so they can be used, and Drake will kind of spy them and register them as dependencies. So here I want to insert a new chunk, which I don't have a keyboard shortcut for, but I'll do that. Okay. And I think the way that this was set up in Jenny Bryan's example, it was like had some text. There were so it was like some word lengths dollar rec. So how many words were in the input? Oh gosh, yep. Words in the input. Cool. And then in here, the histogram is just a ggplot object, right? So I don't have to do anything fancy. I can just say word lengths histogram and let knitr do all the magic of turning that into a plot. So I'm going to hit Control M again to run the pipeline. Oh, I've done something. Word lengths histogram not found. Okay. This is good. It's good to get mistakes. So I called that word lengths histogram, Control L. Yeah. Histogram. Did I make it? Anyone see? Did I make a typo or something? No target. Ah. That's a bit interesting. Did I not save that or something? Ah, naughty boy.
You have a plural issue.
Do I? What do I have?
Versus words length.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, see, like, you know, the pressure's on when you're doing the demo and you lose the ability to see stuff like that.
And that was not me. A few people in the I don't want to take credit for catching it. A few other people caught it, so not me.
Thank you, kind R users. So words length histogram. Yeah. Oh, geez. See, always be consistent. All right, so I'll rerun that. Okay, so that time it worked. Woo! And so kill that. Jump back to the Markdown. Okay, so that's all pretty much working now. I think it looks like our Markdown document was rendered. So what I should be able to do, I'll jump back to the plan, and if I load this one, this gives me access to the path. So I jump over here, I can go browse. Oh, you're not going to be able to see it, of course. But what I can do is do browse URL word lengths report, and it'll pop up the report on another screen, which you can't see. But that's okay. Can I get it in a viewer or something? Oh, actually, what I can do, if I hit, so this is another thing, like, because so I can make this work with the knit function, like if you want to use the knit button in our studio. What I need to do though is I just need to like source my packages. And I need to include here to do that. So that's going to be a little bit annoying. So let me just like do a little quick hack. Source Drake, source tidyverse. That should be enough, right? So if I do that, and then I knit this. No, object Drake, not that. Oh, what am I doing? I want to say library. Oh, sorry. Again, total spam. Slightly embarrassing. All right, so knit that. And that's because, oh, again, it's popped up in a different window that you probably can't see, right? Yeah, classic. All right, so I'll stop trying to do that. Maybe I can just, I'm just gonna accept that you don't need to see that.
Go to your options and change it to pop up in the viewer instead of a new window.
Options?
Yeah, options, global options.
Yeah.
Our Markdown. then where it says show output in window, change that to viewer. A little lower.
Sure. Oh man, thank you. Like I said, I'm a bit of an RStudio noob. All right. Yeah, all right. So that's what we're doing. All right. Now, things I want to reflect on. How much time do we have? Am I over time or do I still have a couple of minutes?
You're still good. You're good.
Okay. Okay. So what I want to reflect on, a couple of things. So to sketch out a high-level plan like this and not have to focus on implementing emacs, but also the fact that we've broken down things into these like kind of bite-sized pieces that has so many kind of deep benefits, and I've written a bit about them in the blog post. But you know, I guess one thing I can quickly show you is like if I jump in here and make an error. Okay, so stop an error. Okay, so let's run that. Yeah, so you probably can't see, but I just I tried to run that pipeline and I got an error. Oh yeah, we're on a different thing now. Yeah, so we got an error. Just RStudio because I will have to reshare my screen. But let's just restart my R session. So let's imagine that I've just like opened up RStudio. I'm coming in cold from yesterday. I had that error. So what do? Like I run the pipeline just to see what's going on. Oh yeah, I had that error. Where was the error? It was in make word lengths, histogram. So jump in here, and then I can quickly just like load the dependencies from the cache. So load that one. Yeah, start running the code. Oh yeah, load my packages. Start running the code. Okay, made the plot. Nope, that's all working. Oh yeah, that's the error. Delete, save, rebuild. Is everything fixed? Everything's fixed. And I find that so useful to be able to context switch and to be able to quickly find, you know, where errors are occurring. It's like having an always-on debug helper type thing. And the other thing is like, did you notice that I didn't have to use this file panes at all? The file pane to browse files. Like this plan describes the structure of my project. And I was just using the jump to definition to find things. So like, it's almost like structure doesn't matter. Like this is the structure. The file structure doesn't really matter, so long as everything's wired up using the _Drake file. And the other thing is that when you're working this way, so we often have like 3 or 4 people working on something like this simultaneously. And we so rarely get merge conflicts. And I think that's because where a merge conflict's gonna happen, it's gonna happen here in the plan. And if it does, like everything's really simple here. It's just like, okay, I need to rearrange these function calls, or I need to delete that one, or should, you know, you added a new argument, whatever. It's quite easy to see what's happening. And then because all the work's happening sort of individually, we're all working inside these individual functions, that's pretty much 0 chance of getting a merge conflict, unless someone else like jumps in to fix a bug or something. But I did a typo there, I just saw, sorry about that. Yeah, so like that's really nice as well. So yeah, like I said just before, I just want to reiterate, I'm not saying this is the workflow you should use, but maybe you've seen some ideas, maybe you've seen some places you can take your own workflow to help make things kind of more comfortable. Yeah, and I hope I've kind of demystified Drake a little bit. Like Drake is deep, don't get me wrong. You can take it a lot of places, but I'm using like maybe 5–10% of it in this, maybe more than that, maybe 20% of it in this demo. And that's like the 20% that I use most of the time. I rarely ever use the dynamic stuff. Because it makes the debugging stuff a lot easier if you keep it static, because this target name can appear inside my function and I can load it from the cache and all that kind of stuff. All right, so that's it. I think I want to wrap up there. So thank you all for watching. Yeah, happy to take questions here, happy to take questions on Twitter. Like I love talking about this stuff. So yeah, thanks very much.
So thank you very much for being here. If this were in person, we'd be giving you a round of applause. So instead, you just sit here in silence for about 10 seconds while we all virtually applause for you. 10 seconds might be excessive. I'll give you 5. Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Miles. We have a few questions for you. Some people are applauding in the chat, so thank you folks for playing along. Roaring applause, even better. So I've compiled a few questions here. as we go, if people ask more questions, I will do my best to grab them. So first we have a question. What about workflow tools like KNIME and DataIQ DSS?
So I have no idea what those are.
KNIME is
you know what they are?
Yeah, so KNIME is an old machine learning data processing platform. I say old, it was really big in the 2000s. And DataIQ is like a data science studio. They essentially make a DAG. It's a GUI that you drag and drop DAGs. You can plug in different things. So I guess you have...
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's just a personal preference. I'm very much not about GUI tools. I like to keep everything in code, and that's because I like to keep everything in Git repositories. And so, yeah, for me, that would never work. But I do get that, like, for people who are domain experts, those types of tools can be really useful. Yeah, and I think if they give you the benefits of caching and the ability to quickly kind of drill into issues and problems like you see with the Drake target graph, then I'd say, like, if that's where your team's at, you've got mainly domain expertise and not much programming expertise, that would make sense.
Cool. A lighter question before we get into harder ones. What's the correct pronunciation of cache? Is it cache or cache?
Oh, I think it's cache, but I've been saying cache since I was a kid. Like, I started using computers when I was like 7 or 8 years old, and I would read cache, and I'm not having heard anyone ever say it, and that's just like stuck. So yeah, I say cache. Sorry, everyone.
Now, when someone asked that question, actually, a bunch of people in the chat went off, and it seemed like all the Aussies are saying cache. And
right. Well, there you go.
You might not be alone on that one.
Yeah.
All right. What was and actually this was answered, but I want to make sure I'm not sure everyone saw it. What was the package that you mentioned that made it easier to create shortcuts?
Oh yeah, so that's fnmate. So that's on my GitHub. So fnmate. I'll link everything that I've used here. So I'll put together a little bit of a GitHub repo that has my slides, links to the packages, and also my key bindings, so you can see exactly what I was doing. Yeah, so don't worry, that's coming.
And I believe actually they were talking about the shortcuts package.
The shortcuts package. So that's Garrick Aidenbury's shortcuts package. So you can find that on his GitHub, and I think it's like SHRTCTS. So the shortcuts but without the vowels.
Yes. Cool. So that's another one. All right. And since you mentioned fnmate, do you have an example of how you do the detailed documentation of an fnmate created function?
Do I have an example? Oh, I mean, not to hand. This is my personal computer, not my work computer. But yeah, it's just the Roxygen. So we use the Roxygen template. And mainly I focus on documenting like what I expect the arguments to be. I don't really write, big descriptions. I just focus on like, this is what the inputs are expected to be, and this is what the return value is going to be. That's the main thing I do. And then it doesn't matter whether you export the function or not. Like, you're not doing a package, but I think the Roxygen format is still quite nice.
How do you deal with like during the development process? You typically work interactively, but
yeah,
and how's that jive with Drake? 'Cause I know that if you load an object, it invalidates the cache. You have to start all over again.
Yeah, so I mean, like as you saw, I'm running rmake. So there's two kind of makes in Drake. There's regular make and then there's rmake. So just plain make, I guess I should call it. So I use rmake because it's always running in a separate R session, so it can't really interact with my local development environment. So yeah, you're never going to get accidental invalidation or stuff like that happening.
So speaking of rmake, a follow-up question, how do you pass in arguments, let's say parameters that came from an R Markdown document that you're using interactively? How do you pass interactive objects into an rmake session?
Ooh, see, I feel like that's quite different to my workflow. So you want to pass parameters to an R Markdown document. So when we've done that, we've just had the parameters appear in the plan as like other targets, so it would just be like a target that is a literal value, and that gets passed as a parameter into the R Markdown document. And so it still works, with rmake. That's how we've done it.
Okay.
Yeah, since I'm not an RStudio user, I think there might be some RStudio context there that I'm not quite getting. Like maybe RStudio has a wizard for it. Is that kind of the idea? Yeah, I don't know.
What I was referring to is situations when you have parameters from our Markdown document. I have personally, and so I can give some color to this fellow person's question. If I'm debugging and I'm not using our Markdown, I will create a list of parameters and it has like, if interactive, do this. If not, don't do it. This way it doesn't mess with the parameters. And then cool. I want to have the plan pick up on that, because if it was ran inside of our Markdown, it would be run. But if it's running interactively, I need to make sure those parameters exist.
All right. Yeah, I mean, well, if you're using RMake, you would be running in non-interactive mode, and if you're using make, you would be running in interactive mode. So I guess it's just making the choice of which one you want.
Okay. And can you use rMake? I guess you wouldn't use rMake from inside of an R Markdown document. You'd have to use that strictly from the console, whereas make itself you could run inside R Markdown.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. We have a question about your coding environment. You mentioned you haven't used RStudio in a while, so what do you normally use for coding?
Yeah, normally I use Emacs. I've been using that for sort of 2 or 3 years. And that was mainly just to try and be more keyboard driven. I'm someone who gets a lot of RSI. So I was trying to like build, basically like work without pain. And yeah, Emacs and VS Code I experimented with a bit and sort of settled on Emacs.
And you do know that RStudio has Emacs key bindings.
They do, but the joke is that I actually use Vim evil mode inside Emacs. So it's all a hodgepodge of stuff. And also, they do. But RStudio's key bindings are a little bit limited for me. So I'm actually like in the process of discussing a feature request with them. Like it probably will never get approved, but like I like to have what are called leader keys. So you can press like key combinations in sequence. So you don't have to stretch. So you might have like one of my like, some might have like comma M R or something like that. And those kind of work in RStudio, but you can only do 2. You can't do 3. So it's like deal breaker.
I've actually heard Radford Neal, who wrote Pretty Quick R, he had a similar comment that you shouldn't have a shortcut defined by a key combo. It should be a key combo defining the shortcut. So lets you create whatever you want. So you have more than one shortcut for the same command.
Yeah.
All right. Then continuing onwards, a lot of these are about your process. What was the keyboard shortcut for running the plan?
So I just had that. So I've just bound that, right? So I just had that as Control M. You could set it to anything. There's an add-in in Drake that gives you access to that. So the add-in I think we saw was run a Drake workflow. So you could just create any binding you wanted to that.
Okay. Someone actually is asking to see, can we see all of your shortcuts? Do you like them saved as a text file somewhere people can...
Yeah. So RStudio has them in a text format, and I'll add them to the repo that I released for this talk, so you can see what they all were.
Shortcuts are very popular.
Yeah.
Let's see. Oh, could you show the dependency graph that you made from your plan?
Oh, damn it. Yes, I totally meant to do that. Yeah, okay. So now I just have to go back and share my screen. I have like a giant like thing on a piece of paper here saying show the dependency graph. And I still didn't do it. Okay, yeah. So there's a few different, tell me if you can see RStudio. Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay, so there's a few different ways to do this in Drake. Well, there's 2 ways. It's like, do you want the R version, which is use the underscore Drake file, or do you want the other version? So I want to use the underscore Drake file. So that should have popped up in the viewer. Yeah. Let me just try and blow that up for you. Maybe, yeah. There you go. So that's roughly the dependency. I think it's the dependency graph that I had earlier on the slides, although I seem to have an extra, oh yeah. Got the RMD file. No, I don't know. It's basically the same. Maybe I've got one more function than the other one I had. Yeah, I think I do. And they're all green because they're all up to date. But if I was to make a change, I could invalidate one of the, like make a change here. These ones would go to black.
Someone is actually asking, can we see what the dependency graph looks like when there's been an error?
Oh yeah. Okay, so let's try that. Oh. So rerun that. So get the error. Okay. Rerun the dependency graph. Yeah. So there you go. So I've never actually seen this. I've never run the dependency graph with an error, but that's quite cool. You get the big red dot. Here's where you should look. That's nice.
Yeah, that is nice. Because when I get errors, that's nice to be able to see it. Sometimes it's hard to read the error codes. Okay. Then we have a question. Do you have an example from your work where Jake has really saved you time or money? And also, can you tell us about some of the deadlines you run into in the context of your work?
Some of the deadlines. Oh yeah, okay.
And has it saved you time and money?
Yeah, so I guess, I mean, for me, the big thing is context switching. So that comes into the deadlines thing. So like last year, as you all probably heard, like massive season for bushfires in Australia. And that meant that in addition to my regular work, I was getting all these like panicked requests for different types of reports and stuff. And because like we were like all hands to the pump, I had to jump on that. And I was doing a lot of context switching. And in particular, I had to make a lot of maps on very short notice because like there's this political process in Australia where like if you have a disaster, you've got like the local council has, I think, like either 60 or 90 days to lodge a claim to the government to get like disaster assistance funding. But they have to provide proof. So I had to like, had all these like councils, like, you know, hassling my team for maps that would show like where the fires were and where they went and what they burnt. And it was very much like jumping from project to project to project to project. And then sometimes jumping back because people would be like, oh, hey, you made this map, but like you forgot this, or, you know, can you put more in about this? So the context switching thing of just like being able to jump into a project and use that project's cache that already existed and not have to like rerun stuff and just make quick changes and then get out something that I could send to someone. Like, I think that saved a lot of time. Yeah. But just in general, I think the debugging thing, like the way that I can quickly drill into errors and find problems. I mean, I'm not sure the amount of hours that saved me or money that saved me, but it would be a lot.
Great. So here is an interesting one about Docker and containers.
Oh yeah.
Does Drake allow you to separate its parts in such a way that parts could exist in different folders or containers? Or does it all need to be in one location like Shiny?
Yeah, so this is like, I'm not a big Docker user, mainly because like at my work, we just can't use it. We have like an old security setup and Docker can't communicate with Docker Hub and stuff. But yeah, I'd say Drake's pretty flexible, right? And when you say parts, I'm not really sure what you mean. Do you mean like different inputs and outputs and stuff? I'd say yes, because like Drake can, you know, read inputs from anywhere. Like it's just R code. I can read inputs from anywhere over a network, so I can read inputs from a Docker file. Can I run code from inside another Docker file? No, that would be really awkward. No, probably possible. I guess I'm just sourcing an R file, right? So long as I have a path to that Docker file, that would work. Yeah. So I think my answer is yes. Yeah, I couldn't provide any support for you for doing that, but that seems like it's possible.
But if enough people ask you on Twitter, you'll learn so you can answer all of them.
Yeah, probably, yeah.
All right. Yeah, so Docker is very popular, obviously, in the not just the data science community, but other places. And a lot of these, pardon me?
I said, yeah, that's right. And I would use it if I could. So we tend to lean a lot on the WSL because we can't do Docker.
Now, I know a lot of like these other tools depend on Docker, like Airflow and other ones. Airflow and MLflow rely heavily on each part of your work being in a separate Docker container. So I know that is something. And with Drake's parallelization capabilities, I bet you someone's got to be thinking about Dockerizing parts of it.
Oh yeah, right. Well, that's where I think like if that's where you are, you're better off maybe looking at targets, the new sort of iteration of Drake, because that's been built more with this kind of use case in mind. And I know that Will Landau is like actively talking to the Metaflow developers about like ways to sync up Drake and Metaflow. So that's where I'd start. Oh, sorry, sync up targets in Metaflow.
Yeah. And it's interesting you measure security, because I know some security experts aren't a huge fan of what the security that Docker offers, and a lot of it's just like squint your eyes and hope nothing happens. So
yeah.
So then we have someone else asked, related to that, do you ever have a situation where you deploy your Drake projects to a remote compute cluster, or do you just run them locally?
Yeah, so we do. We have not very many, but we have deployed them to AWS. We don't. So Drake is, that's the awkward thing for us, I guess, is Drake is like got some beautiful abstractions for HPC. So if you're an academic and you use like traditional HPC, so high performance computing, clusters with sort of schedulers and Slurm and all that kind of stuff, Drake like has really good on-ramps for that. We have AWS, so it's much more homebrew, not as easy. And so actually I tend to fall back to just like using a really big instance and just running the project there, which is, pretty much just check it out on the instance and run it. Like I don't have to do anything extra to do that.
And when someone asked that, we actually had Henrik come in and say, Drake supports parallelization via futures, and futures supports, as you just said, parallelization via Linux containers. And Henrik, this is my way of letting you know that you are the November speaker at the meetup.
Nice.
And you can give a talk all about this. And you're laughing. That's the way. It's simple as that sometimes. Someone comes up with a good idea, and they're the speaker. So we'll talk to you in November. We'll track you down. Thank you. That's the way it works, folks, sometimes. Miles got dragged in because he was on Twitter. Henrik gets dragged in because he came to the meetup. You know, sometimes we're shameless like that. Let's see. Oh yeah, well, someone else piped in. WI. I can't see their name. It might be Will Landau actually speaking.
Oh, yeah.
It's WI space L, and he says that Drake can. Another answer. Drake can. Will, you're the December speaker. Drake can leverage the future package of parallel computing, and futures can run in Docker containers. Oh, another option is to run the whole pipeline in container. And interesting. I will actually post this for December, Will. You say run the whole pipeline in container, but it'd be interesting to putting each individual piece in a container. So that way, like imagine you get this into Kubernetes and each piece could be running in parallel as needed. That's something that you'll have to talk about in December. And you folks think I'm joking, we were going to find you and make you speak soon. All right. So with that, I don't see if there's any last minute questions. Usually when I say, okay, that's all the questions, someone chimes in at the last minute. So knowing this, I'll give everyone a chance to chime in at the last minute and see if there's any more questions. Then we'll just sit here nicely with each other. A bunch of people saying thank you, as you well deserved. Oh, tough one. Tabs or spaces?
Oh, I mean, spaces. It has to be spaces, doesn't it?
Honestly, we know from Stack Overflow that you earn more money when you use spaces. And by assuming you remapped your tab key to give you 4 spaces.
Yeah, absolutely. The tab key, but the tab key makes spaces. That's how I roll. And
we see, another question came in. I didn't see it. Thank you, Amada. What are the next steps for Drake or disadvantages? Where do they go from here to learn more about this after your excellent talk? Where do they go besides your Drake post?
Yeah, so there's the Drake blog post. The Drake manual is quite good. I just think the issue with the manual is that it's quite long and has a lot of different chapters, and like it feels like, oh no, like how much of this do I need to know? But hopefully now I've just shown you that you actually don't need to know that much. And maybe like that was my hope, is that I could give you a kind of like boost up to go like, this is just what you need. And now you can feel more comfortable reading the Drake manual.
I will say this about the Drake manual. I've read through it, I think, twice now. With the exception of the dynamic branching chapter, everything else I've read twice. Actually, it's a fast read. It's long, but if you wrote that, it's nicely written.
Oh, it's really high quality. There's a few Drake videos, I think, linked in the manual as well, if you wanted to get like a bit more bird's eye view before you jumped in. And I actually Will gave a really great rOpensci webinar a few months ago now. And that's online. That's really, really good as well.
Nice. If you could post that, we could put it into the Slack channel for everybody.
Okay, cool.
There was actually another good question I missed earlier. How would you describe your R skill level when you first got your job at the fire service? Were you an expert then, or did you learn a lot on the job?
I would not class myself as an expert now. So I'd say I was sort of intermediate. I have written a few R packages, so I know what I'm doing. But definitely with respect to workflow, I never had to think about that before. So yeah, I had to start thinking about workflow when I started this job, because what we were doing wouldn't scale. And I'd never worked in a team this closely before. So all that stuff I had to learn on the job. Yeah. And
how were you relative to your R skills when you first started the job?
Yeah, that definitely improved. Like in terms of like in workflows and stuff, I'm way better at like plots and maps. Holy, geospatial stuff. Like that's been huge. Yeah. So improved in ways. Yeah.
I feel like maps are so huge right now. Like we had in the past year, we've had workshops from Kaz Sakamoto, professor at Columbia for GIS. He's actually giving a workshop this week on GIS. We had Edzer at Pabesma, the author of Half the Stuff, give a workshop for us. Mapping is just really getting hot right now.
Yeah, I mean, it is really accessible in R. So yeah,
yes, it is.
That's why.
Yes, it's very accessible. We have another great question here. What do you think the learning path is for someone who's new to R to get into Drake? So not just an average R user, but a new R user getting into Drake.
Yeah, I think you have to want what Drake offers, and you have to just start using it in your projects. And I think the thing is, like, a lot of people go like, oh yeah, but my project's not big enough to use Drake. Well, it's not now. You know, in the beginning, you know how everything's going to work, and it's all like small and tidy, but things grow and grow in scope. And that's where, like, if you start with Drake, when things grow, you'll be having a much better time. So it's like anything, like you have to be motivated to do it by an actual use case. So if you have a project, just say the next project I'm going to do, I'm going to use Drake, and then you'll learn from there.
Great. So let me just check. All right. I think that is everyone. I was going to give 10 more seconds to see if someone types. That doesn't give them much time. But, you know, we asked a lot of questions. Normally at this point, we say, if you have more questions, come to the bar. So I guess if you have more questions, since we can't go to the bar, although I do encourage everyone to have their own virtual alcoholic or non-alcoholic beverage as we go through this. Please ask questions.
It's a bit early for me, but, you know,
Which one?
I'll have a cup of tea.
Nice cup of tea.
It's a bit early for me.
It's 10 a.m. there. For the conference this week, we usually serve alcohol and tea and stuff. So this year we've actually sent out coupon codes for everyone to get just kind of whiskey and tea and matcha tea for this to make it better for everyone since we can't meet in person.
That is cool.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. We put a lot of effort into this conference. Like normally it's like, it's a bit of a party. So we're trying to bring the party to people's houses.
Yeah.
We got
I really have to attend in person one day.
Yes, hopefully you will make it. You'll be able to. Oh, Amada's showing the program. Hopefully you'll be able to. Hopefully next year. Let me know. Actually, A, let me know if you're going to be around during the conference, and B, you got to speak in person at the meetup when you actually make it to New York.
Yeah.
We've had in the past year, we've had 3 or 4 Australians speak in person, so there's no excuse for you now.
Yeah.
It'll be so much fun.
Amada's showing off the program. We actually have printed programs and mailed it to everybody who's in the States at least.
Oh, nice.
The States.
Try to make it feel like home for everybody because we miss people. We have actually someone else typing another question coming in. So if you don't mind answering 2 or 3 more questions, we will. Stickers, yes. Stephen Howe, yes, you got stickers. We mailed people hex stickers to make them feel like they're there in person. Let's see another virtual conference do that.
Yeah, I think this is the most dedicated recreation I've heard of.
Yes, we were really trying hard because it's a fun time. It's all about that human connection. So we're trying to make that connection still. So while Steven is enjoying his stickers, when working on a project that also uses Python, would you use reticulate in Drake or make-d or make files and Python scripts? You don't use Python at all, I'm guessing.
No, I don't.
Neither do I.
No, so sorry. I can't answer that question.
All right, when I answer your question, Carlos, I'm sorry. And one more thing about the conference since we're talking about it. We have an art auction at the conference. So we have 4 or 5 paintings, pieces of art, not just paintings, pieces of art that are made by members of the community. And we're having an auction, and all the proceeds are going to go to the R Foundation. So anyone around the world can bid on these things, and you win the piece of artwork, we ship it to you, and we donate the money to the R Foundation. So it goes to a good cause. So further recreating this in-person environment. Thank you, Mom.
I don't know if, yeah, the stand-up comedy set will also be very funny. We have a comedian doing jokes about math and statistics only.
Nice.
Yes. So folks, this is what you got to look forward to during our week for those of you who are attending. So with that, on just a quick note about this meetup you just watched, the video will be up on YouTube in a few days. It might take us a little longer this week. It's a little bit of a busy week. And we are going to get slides from Miles, and we'll post it at NYHackR. Another question here. Oh, got 2 more questions. One asked me, have we had Rob Heinemann give a talk? Not only is he here right now, he gave a talk in person and gave a workshop in person a year or 2 ago, and he is the very first speaker Friday morning at the conference. Nice. So yes, we love Rob, and he's definitely partaking in this community.
I just want to say, I'm pretty sure that I've recently converted Rob Heinemann to Drake too. I mean, he can clarify, but I think I've got him on board.
Nice, nice. So yeah, you're proselytizing very well in this thing. Russia, do you use a particular package for spatiotemporal data?
I mean, SF, yeah. All the SF stuff. What's the one? GG Spatial, also love it. We do a lot of static maps. GG Spatial is great. Also the interactive stuff, Map Deck, that's been really, really great. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that one, but Map Deck is a sort of mapping to DeckGL. Yeah.
And I will say there's a leaflet package add-on called LeafGL, which allows you to plot millions of points on an interactive leaflet map and have it render in seconds.
I haven't tried it, but I mean, I trust anything written by Tim Appelens, so yeah,
it is Tim.
Yeah.
Now Tim will be very modest and tell you he didn't really do it. He's just putting wrapper code around this other person whose name is escaping me. But Tim is a genius. He made it amazing. All right. With that, I think we answered all the questions everyone had about Drake, about other people, about everything. Someone asked, the package for Leaflet is LeafGL. I'll just type it in the chat so it's easy to see. It's not on CRAN yet. It's only on GitHub, but I've been using it for a few months now, and they've taken a lot of actually my feature requests. They are great and really responsive. They're super awesome. So we talked about mapping, we talked about Drake, we talked about conference, we talked about Australia, we talked about members of the community. As a great talk. I want to thank Miles, who might have to go to work at some point. I don't know. It's in the morning there for him.
Yeah, I'm going to work pretty much directly after this.
Okay, great.
Working from right here though, so it's just open up a new window and
short commute for you makes it easy. So yeah. makes it very easy. All right, so thank you very much, and I hope to see everyone as much as you can at the conference or next month's meetup. Remember, September will be about the command line. We have October planned. Now Henrik has agreed because he said he laughed, so he'll be speaking in November. Hopefully, we'll in December, and we'll see everyone else going forward. And hope everyone has a great time. Once again, virtual applause for Miles. This is really great. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. That was really fun. Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, everyone have a great night or morning or afternoon, depending where you are in the world.